feet up and just, I feel like a feet up and just, I feel
There we
like a,
go. Okay, we are live. Good
yay.
morning and welcome to Friday, January 19th. This is Genevieve and I'm Cassie, and we're here to talk to you about kids and addiction. We want to talk about just making it more normal to talk about it. So we're so excited to be here, and we're so grateful to have this platform to be able to share what we know and what we learn. As you see that Sarah's missing this week, but we're just knowing she's having a fantastic time. She's on a Zumba cruise and dancing a little heart out. So I can't wait till she comes back and she can fill us in on all the fun, exciting events. Next year, my goal is to go with her. I'm like, that would be so fun.
I
Um,
kind of want to go too.
yeah, it would be great. So let's just dive right in, because I know both of us have kiddos, and that's part of the reason we want to talk about this is we're both moms, and we really feel like it's important just due to our own path and our own kids and dealing with our own stuff. And then I feel like, Genevieve, your career, your profession, and even a little bit of mine has led us to know that we need to talk about this. This is an important
Yeah.
topic that parents need to understand. It's okay for you to talk about addictions, and just know that I may have to take care of my little one. I just saw he woke up this morning.
Yeah.
He's usually pretty good in the mornings, but I'll let you take over for a second while I pop out.
Okay. Um, yeah, I mean, so I thought maybe we would start, Cassie, just by talking about maybe a behavior that we had when we were an adolescent or like a child adolescent, um, that didn't serve us, but was comforting, like was there a behavior or something that we had that maybe didn't serve us or stopped serving us, but continued to be comforting and that we kind of continue to engage in?
Yeah. Okay. So I was thinking about this. I was thinking, I don't remember having necessarily addictive behaviors, but I do
Mhm.
remember being taught and recognizing, like looking back, I can now recognize it. Obviously, as a child, I didn't know that it was happening. But if I look at the history of my childhood and what has really shaped me today, and the journey that I've had to deal with, is that our family, we met over food. So food really became this way of connection. It was a way for us to, anytime we came together, like, let's have macaroni and cheese, let's make lasagna. Like, it was always these warm, carby, delicious foods that I
Mm.
now see in my life, that those were the things that I actually tended to numb when I became an adult. It was like, okay, I'm feeling bad. I think I need some ice cream. I'm feeling bad. I think I need some mac and cheese. And so that's probably for me something
Yes.
that I used to soothe myself, as food, because I just saw
Yeah.
everyone else around me doing it.
Yeah.
And what about
Yeah.
you? What was your thing?
Well, mine's kind of bizarre, and so this will be really vulnerable.
I love it.
Um, I would like, I think that I was really anxious. I was a really anxious child. And um, one of the things that I would do pretty routinely is nail bite. And I would, um, when I became an adolescent, I actually it became a like a form of sort of almost like self-harm. Um, I would bite my nails and then I would use the nail and I would poke my gums with it. And like a really, but like just bizarre behavior. And it was all driven by anxiety and stress. And um, it took me a long time to break my nail biting habit, but I like haven't bit my nails like unless I have like a hang nail or something. I
Yeah.
haven't bit my nails in 25 years. So
Wow. That is awesome.
yeah.
That is
So
so amazing.
but
And
it
interesting.
was, go ahead.
I was just going to say, an interesting story on that is, my husband is the same way. So he has always bit his nails. His daughter bites her nails. And now, of course, my children, all three of them bite their nails because that's what they've watched. And
Yeah.
it was interesting because my husband said one day, I think it was probably 5 or 6 years ago, he was like, he saw that he was the leading factor of why the kids did what they did. And he was like, I'm just going to quit biting my nails. Like, let's all do it together. And so
Yeah.
he just made a decision and he quit. He was like, I'm just not going to do it anymore. And now he doesn't do it. It's very rare, like
Yeah.
unless he's super, super anxious. He doesn't even realize that he does it, actually. It's interesting because most of the time he doesn't. And
Yeah.
then when he gets stressed out, then it's like, and he's like, I'm not, it's just a hangnail. And then he's like, kind of leaning towards it's not the same thing. But it's interesting because each of our kids, they tried and they couldn't do it. They couldn't quit the biting because it was, well, my smallest one has just started. We've been talking about it more lately, but I feel like that's something that's pretty common. Like, isn't it something that you see a lot with kids? Like it's on their body.
Absolutely.
It seems
Absolutely.
normal to just
Yeah.
like chew on
Oh,
something when you're feeling anxious,
absolutely.
like close chewing.
It's a super common behavior, and actually it can get really out of control. Like people can bite and get things down to like the cuticle, and I don't even know all the terms for nail, but
Yeah.
like do harm, and
So
and
my son has that. My oldest son, he has probably the highest level of anxiety of all my kids, and he's got like almost like his fingers are swollen from. It looks like
yeah,
they're swollen. They're not. It's just calloused over the years of
yeah,
picking so
yeah,
much.
yeah,
And so that's something, actually, he used to do it. He still tends to do it now a little bit, but we've been talking about it more in bed. He'll lay down. We couldn't figure out why. We were actually talking to the doctor about this yesterday. We were kind of reviewing his case, and
mhm,
he was like, well, because she was asking how his sleep was, and he's like, it's actually a lot better. So they had changed some of his medications, and we were talking about, well, why was he not, before he was sleeping 15 hours, but it was really, he was in bed 15 hours, but he wasn't going to sleep right away because he was sitting and chewing and
yeah,
thinking and stewing over the day
yes,
and what
yeah,
was going to happen tomorrow. And we didn't know. So here we are as parents, we're like, why are you sleeping 15 hours? And the doctor's like, oh, he's a growing boy. And I'm like,
right,
I don't think so. Like 15 hours is excessive.
yeah,
So either like depression. So I think we should mention that. One of
yeah,
the number one signs is people will sleep a lot when they're depressed. Um,
yes,
but for him, he was actually not sleeping in the beginning part of the night. He was
yeah,
chewing, like that was how he
yeah,
was managing his anxiety.
totally,
And we didn't know because he didn't know there was anything wrong with that. He thought that it
totally,
was just what he did because he's
yeah,
him.
yeah,
So I think it's important to just say to parents, try to come in a way of compassion, because I feel like for myself, I came as a way of, I was irritated that my son is
yeah,
sleeping till 10, 15, 10, 11 o'clock in the morning, going to bed at 8. I'm like, this is redonkulous.
yeah,
Like, what are you
totally,
doing? So
right,
having compassion and looking back, I'm like, man, I wish I would have known when we first started viewing this when he was 13. He's now almost 16. So 3 years this has been going on where he sleeps excessively, but he
yeah,
wasn't even sleeping. And I didn't know because I don't watch him. So now we kind of like pop in on our kids before we go to bed just to see like, are they really
yeah,
sleeping? Is something going on? And it's not a place of fear. Like I want to clarify,
yeah,
this isn't for, I'm not saying this for you parents to be fearful that something's going on with your child, but it's more like, hey, I notice you're still awake. Is there something you want to talk about? In our
yeah,
house, the kids know like writing before bedtime is really, really
yeah,
powerful.
yeah,
If they can't write, Blaze can't write, so he will color. Um, that's actually how we fixed Blaze's like sleeping patterns, as we would color before bedtime because he couldn't shut his brain off.
yeah,
It was just like this constant worry of simple things. The kids, they worry about simple things, and that's something that still needs to be addressed even if it seems simple to us.
yeah, yes, very much so. And I think that, like that, just that, like you're talking about, just that awareness and attunement, like noticing a shift in your child's sleep pattern, a shift in their mood or temperament, you know, a shift in their appetite, those kinds of things, and just being aware of that and attuned and engaged enough to when you notice those behavior changes,
Yeah.
you know, making sure that you're exploring them, and not and doing it in a way that is loving and compassionate and empathetic, and not shaming, but just like, hey, let's explore what's going on with you. And I was just thinking that, we've been in Daring Greatly, we've been talking a lot about behave like the shields and the armor that we wear to protect ourselves from vulnerability. Um,
Yeah,
and numbing,
if you wanna be a part of that, real quick, the Daring Greatly book club, it's a lot of fun. Actually, there's a Facebook group you can come and listen to the book every day during the week, and then you can also pop in on Saturdays and we have book club discussion. So if you want, there's links below that you can click to join us, or just drop in the comments, hey, I'm interested, and one of us will reach out to you. So don't hesitate to reach out. Sorry, go ahead.
no, thanks for plugging that because
Yeah.
it's great. And, but we've been talking about like, or we've been exploring with Brene, um, the armory of numbing our vulnerability, and really like all of us engage in numbing behaviors, and I think when you're looking at adolescent numbing behaviors, a lot of times it's driven by a sense of disconnection,
Mhm.
or it's driven by a sense of wanting to connect and not knowing how to access connection.
Yeah.
Um, and that, adolescents are very like socially motivated. Um, that, so a lot of their decision making is centered around peer influence. Um, and so, if you are working as a parent to have open lines of communication and talking about things, um, you can really effectively, I think, um, not prevent but mitigate that potential to develop, some sort of addiction or numbing behavior that's maladaptive. It's that
Yeah.
attunement. One of the things that I just wanted to say is I was doing a little research in advance of this, and um, there's some really recent studies. This was, I think, in 2022. That was the most recent one I could find. Um, so between 2016 and 2020, the use of illicit substances by adolescents went up by 61%.
Wow. Oh
Yeah,
my goodness.
1 in 8 teenagers are abusing an illicit substance right now.
Wow.
Um,
One in
eight,
eight.
1 in 8. Mm-hmm. 21.3% of eighth graders have tried illicit drugs at least once.
Wow.
So it's significant. This is like it's a high profile public health concern, and not just for illicit substances, but what we're seeing a lot is that kids are engaging in a lot of behaviors that are dangerous, and it's not just using illicit drugs, it's self-harming. It is driving recklessly. It's like jumping off cliffs. It's like this risk, it's the
Yeah.
engagement in risky behavior.
Well,
And
and add to that the accessibility of watching other kids do it online, right?
totally.
I think I read somewhere that they were talking about that was part of the statistic too, is that because we now have influencers, and this is not a knock by any means, because there are a lot of really positive influencers out there too, but there are some that our kids are watching these kids get basically, celebrity status
Mhm.
for going and doing these harmful things. And actually, I don't know if you know this. This is really interesting. Do you know Blippi?
No.
He's like so some parents who have younger kids would probably know. I used to, my son was obsessed with Blippi. He's like this, he wears orange and blue and wears like this bow tie, and he's really, really fun. Like he teaches kids educational material, like about trucks and construction equipment and like how things are made. It's like PBS on YouTube, right?
Yeah.
Apparently he used to be on the other spectrum of the YouTube influence. Like he was very like just inappropriate, not so great things. And I don't know like his whole story, but I just know somewhere along the line he decided to flip it and like, I really need to be a positive influence.
Yeah.
And he now makes millions, right? Like tens and tens of millions of dollars helping children. Now he has like other Blippi
Yeah.
characters and it's like a whole line. But I think that that's something that we could look at too as a society to say, like, who are we putting up on these pedestals? Who are we like encouraging to
Yeah.
be models for our children?
Totally.
And like, and I think it was interesting. I was listening to Ice Cube yesterday. Like, this is so random.
Yeah.
He was on an interview and he was like, there's two sides of of Hollywood, which is basically like our social, it's a social platform.
Yeah.
There's a side that really pushes propaganda, the message that they're trying to push, and then
Yeah.
there's make the money, the profit side. So
Yeah.
he's like, in all things, there's always those two sides of like, what message are we pushing, and or what, how much money are we making off of this? And
Yeah.
I think it's interesting because when you look at that, kids are not paying attention to that, but their behavior can be driven by that because of their
Absolutely.
peers and what they're watching. So
Absolutely.
again, it goes back to modeling as parents, right? Like, what are we consuming? What are we doing?
Yes. Yeah.
And how can we have the
Absolutely.
conversation and not shame them?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, really, really remembering that we just need to be supportive of well, I mean, if we can, if we have the capacity to, we need to be supportive of engaging our kids in pro-social, positive things that keep them feeling connected and not isolated. Um, I think that, you know, because we're hardwired for connection, it's critical that we are facilitating for our kids,
Mhm.
and supporting and encouraging that really positive, those positive and pro-social behaviors.
And I
You
think
know,
too, we forgot to do the disclaimer.
oh yeah,
I
yeah,
want to throw this out there again too, that this is not, we're not diagnosing, we're not telling you that
no,
this is the end all be all. This is simply us sharing our opinions and our knowledge on the
yeah,
subject. So please, please, please always go back to your doctor, your counselor, someone
yes,
who can help you professionally.
yeah,
This is simply an opening of a door for people who may not have access to, those kind of services. And we can even kind of guide you guys a little bit to options in your area
yes,
or online where you would be able to attend something that could be affordable, something that could be helpful. So please just know that this is not in replacement of any kind of therapy,
no,
doctors. We want you to make sure that you understand that this is simply us bringing light to a topic where we
yes,
can kind of open the door for you to have conversations with your children and with your doctors. Because I think as parents, we just like have kids or adopt kids as I did, and then we're thrown into this thing of parenting and we're like, what did I just get myself into? Like there's no
totally,
like guide, there's no
no,
parenting like what is that thing with like your guidelines? There's nothing to
yeah,
tell us the
like
rules
a
about it.
rule
We
book,
have no
like
idea.
a rule book. Yeah,
Sorry,
yeah,
I just wanted to throw that out there. I
there
forgot.
there isn't, and again, yes, you are like so correct to remind everybody that this is really informational, and to be supportive and open the door
Yeah.
for exploring things, and you know to just let you know that these things are like to bring to light things that people just really aren't talking a lot about,
Mm.
and so that there's awareness, like we're like, this is a lot about, you know um encouraging dialogue about things we don't normally talk about.
Yeah.
I think the other just really important thing to understand about adolescence, and I don't know if people may be catching this now, but I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I work with kids and families predominantly, supporting them in a clinical capacity. And one of the things that I have found most helpful to kids and families is talking about brain development and talking about what happens to the adolescent brain. And the adolescent brain is going through some pretty significant changes. It's real
Yeah.
interesting. The brain develops really significantly, about 80% or something like that. I can't remember the exact percentage of our brain is developed by age 3.
Oh
Um,
wow.
uh, and then kind of brain development sort of continues, but it slows for a period of time. And then there's a massive reorganizing of the brain in adolescence. The brain
Mhm.
is pruning neurons, and it's reorganizing and it's establishing, and the amount of remodeling of structures in the brain that occurs, that pruning, is so significant that it can sort of impact decision making, and that is why we see adolescents being very driven by like emotion,
Yeah.
um, being, and being hyper emotional and being reactive and being impulsive and all of those things. And so it's just really important to remember that um, it is very, very normal for kids to take risks. It's very, very normal for kids to rebel. It's all a part of the process of individuation. Um, and we just want to make sure that as kids are engaging in that process, they're not doing, they're not creating neural pathways that lead to addiction, like serious addiction later on, because the brain is very susceptible at that time, and what we found is that if adolescents are engaged in illicit substance abuse to a degree of addiction in their adolescence, sorry, I'm not speaking very clearly, that can lead to significant addiction later in adulthood.
Interesting.
So yeah,
Well,
so
and
it's
I
just
was gonna say, so there is a show I would be interested if you would watch it or if you have seen it. It's on Netflix and it's purely again informational, but there's a lot of I think really helpful and accurate information. It's called The Mind Explained, the Teenage Brain. So there's multiple episodes, but the teenage brain really actually brought me some understanding and made me feel like, okay, I think I can get through the teenage years because teen years are really hard. And
yeah,
part of that is the individuation process.
yeah.
Um, and that kind of leads me into codependency. Like there
Mhm.
can be a really, really gray area when you have codependent behaviors. And I think most parents probably have this sense of like wanting your child not to do the things that you did and wanting
Yeah.
them to be successful. And so there's this like pushing them into this corral of this is where you're
Mhm.
safe. Don't go outside the corral because it's
Yeah.
just not good for you. And so that kind of becomes more codependent and controlling.
Yes.
But I think we do it in a way of like, we don't want them to
Mhm.
get hurt and we don't want them to experience any of these
Yeah.
horrible situations. And I want to just kind of say, like, part of parenting is that learning of letting go and allowing them to,
Absolutely.
because they have to
They
learn, they
do.
have to fall
They
and pick themselves up. So
absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely. And facilitating that, supporting that, like you have to make your own decisions and you have to see how those things play out. Like you cannot wrap your kids in bubble wrap and protect them from everything because then they're not going to learn and
yeah.
grow.
Oh, come
Um,
on.
and be, and because it's because childhood is such a significant time of of development. It is really important to not step in the way of those
Yeah.
processes.
Well,
But it is very scary. And I think, we as parents, we have to strike that balance. We never ever want to come at um I, in my opinion, it's really important to never come at an adolescent with ultimatums, with like all or nothing sort of approaches. You know, um, it's just very important to have like open communication and dialogue. And if you're like, you should never ever use drugs, like that's just gonna plant the seed. Like,
yeah,
well, I'm
for
just gonna
sure.
do that then.
Well, you know
And
what's
if you,
interesting? Like to think about my own experience, like thinking back, I was like, did my parents ever say that to me? So I never really dabbled in drugs, but I think part of it was because my parents never did tell me like I don't ever recall them being like, don't ever use drugs. I remember them saying, I smoked pot. I think they did some pretty illicit drugs because they grew up in the 70s. Like, let's
yeah,
be honest.
absolutely.
Like they probably did some things that I don't even know about and I probably don't need to know about. But we were open. That was the difference is they talked about it with me. They told me how they experienced things. And even with alcohol, I think that there was just an open dialogue for us to be able
Hmm.
to feel comfortable. Like I didn't feel like I couldn't come to them and ask them
Yeah,
things. I was like, oh, they've done it before. So I could come. I wouldn't because I was a teenager. I was like, I'm not going to talk to my parents. But I didn't ever try anything hard. Like I think I
yeah,
did smoke pot in high school and it was because of my peers. Like going back to
yeah,
that peer pressure, it
totally.
was like they were like, just it's fine. It's not going to hurt you. And I will say this, like I think it was two times that I tried it. The first one was like probably okay because it was people that I trusted. Like as far as like when I say okay, I mean not something else laced in it.
Yeah.
And I got lucky that those were the people that I started with, but the second time they laced it with something and I almost died. That's probably the biggest issue I
Wow.
think with kids is that you think you trust
Totally.
your friends. There's no adult to monitor anything. So,
Yeah.
when they're like, hey, try this. And I'm like, I don't want to. Hey, try it. Come on, it's fine. We're all doing it. Oh,
Yeah.
okay. And then
Yeah.
I ended up on the ground. Like I was telling them, please call an ambulance. And they were like,
Yeah.
we can't call the police. Like, we're
Yeah.
gonna get in trouble. So then I was left with, what do I do? Do I call my
Right.
parents? Do I? And I don't even
Right.
remember what ended up happening, but I think they just left me there to like get over the high. And that was it. Like I tried it once. I never told my parents about it. I was done. So you have to have those conversations
Yeah.
because I mean, I didn't know. My parents
Yeah.
didn't tell me like don't take things from strangers that don't know.
Yeah.
Like they were
Right.
not strangers to me, but I didn't think about it being laced with something. So
Right.
we've had these conversations with our boys like you don't know what you're taking. So like if you're going to try drugs, like this is not the avenue. And I'm not
Yeah.
promoting drugs by any means. Like we're not talking about going, "Oh, when you try it." We just had
Yeah.
the
Exactly.
conversation of this happened to me.
Yeah.
And so we need to be aware of this. If you don't know what you're getting into.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I think that just being able to be honest, because no matter like even if you were an adolescent that never engaged in illicit, substance abuse, you engaged in some sort of risky behavior,
Yeah,
guaranteed, because
for
that's
sure.
just part of development. And so
Yeah.
having that compassion and coming from a place of, hey, I was an adolescent once too. And I
Yeah.
get it. I get it. I get that that you are socially motivated, that the peer influence is big, that you want to avoid feeling isolated, that you're seeking, connection, that you're wanting to establish yourself as an individual. Like I get all those things.
Yeah.
And this was my experience. These were the risks I took, and this is what I learned. This is what I learned. Um, and I
And I
know that
think
you're go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think that that's a good point to bring up of the isolation. That was the number one reason that I did try risky behavior was because I wanted to feel included. Like back
Yes.
then, I didn't know that's what it was, but it wasn't that I wanted them to approve of me. I just wanted to be a part of the group and I wanted to experience the joy that I thought that they were experiencing by doing these things together. It seemed to me that everybody was doing all the same things. And it was like, I didn't want to be the one kid that was different saying, no, I'm
Yeah.
not going to do that. But no one ever really taught me about that part of it. I think
Yeah.
that that's probably the area I wish my parents would have told me about setting boundaries.
Yeah.
It's okay to walk away from the party if people are having fun that you don't want to have. And I think the only way to do that is as a parent to talk about it, like what we're doing today. I do remember saying no to friends who had been drinking when they got in the car. And like,
Yeah.
I even remember parents being present, like letting us drink. There were certain people whose parents let us drink and then they would let us drive. And for me, like drinking and driving was never on my radar. Like it wasn't even an
Yeah.
option for me. So I didn't engage in it. And if friends were like, hey, we're all going here, I would say, I'll drive myself. And if anyone wants to ride
Yeah.
with me, you can.
Yeah.
But my parents very early on, I don't know why that was a conversation. Maybe they had something as a youth. But I think if you just have those conversations of like,
Yeah.
these things can lead to death, these things can
Yeah.
lead to hurting other people that you can't undo. Um, so it's really important, I think, to talk about, like you said, the isolation part of it. Kids don't want to feel like they're not included.
They
So,
no. No. They want to feel connected. And
and
when they
did
feel go ahead.
I was just gonna say, did you want to talk about any other types of addictions? Like, did we want to kind of touch upon like different things like
Well,
biting? I know we talked about.
yeah, so I mean I think addiction and as we all know really it's any behavior that becomes becomes a form of numbing. um and I think that it's and that is maladaptive. So I like the concept of thinking about how, like, what is the intention behind this behavior? How is it serving me? um and remembering that. So, technology, food, um, uh,
Cutting. We talked about cutting a little.
substances, cutting, all like there's so many different, even like anxiety disorders like OCD, things like that, like the when a behavior becomes compulsive or becomes something that like you just, yeah, I guess let's just say when a behavior becomes compulsive where you just can't stop yourself, that's the slope. And so paying attention, it doesn't matter what it is. It could be an illicit substance, it could be nail biting, it could be food, it could be self-harm. Um, and I think just really doing an inventory for yourself personally, and also just keeping an eye on just keeping an eye on your kids, their behaviors and how it serves them. Um, Keeping an open mind about the fact that when you talk with a kid about behavior that's maladaptive, it's critical to not be shaming, to be validating, to understand, and to come from a place really of like you can't not like come from a place of saying I want to do harm reduction as opposed to I want to I'm telling you you have to stop this behavior.
So
Um,
how can we have that conversation? Because I think that's probably what people are wondering is like, and even for myself, it's been like a process of trial and error of like what's working and what's not and what's disconnecting. Because what's going to end up happening is these parents come in, and myself included, and say, "Don't do this. This is bad for you. Like this is illegal. This is whatever it is." And then your kid's like, whatever, and then they're disconnected from you because they don't want to hear you tell them the thing that they love to do or the thing that they're doing repetitively that's giving them some sort of soothing, or connecting them to their peers. They don't want to hear you tell them that it's bad for them
yeah,
because it's just going to make them go, okay, that's great, but I'm going to continue doing it.
yeah,
But how can we have that conversation? Like, what is like, maybe if you could give us a suggestion of coming at it to a teen's perspective, like how can we open that door and make them feel validated and
yeah.
not make them feel shamed? Is there a tip that you could give us to talk about addiction?
I think that, the tip that I have is just is because it's really hard because every circumstance is differently.
Yeah.
I will give an example. I have a student who is very, very engaged in self-harming behavior. And he is really struggling with it. He has a lot of shame about it. Um, he knows that it's not serving him. Um, like 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours after, but in the moment, it's such a release that it's very difficult to curb the behavior. And so we're just talking about the function of the behavior and I'm having him track it and
Mm,
just creating awareness around it. Like,
I
when
love
are
it.
you cutting? What are the circumstances around that? Like,
Yeah, what's
really
leading to it?
just really just exploring the purpose and the intention of the behavior, talking about it in a way that's not shaming, like, wow, that this behavior does really serve you in the moment, but how do you feel 2 hours from now, 4 hours from now, 8 hours from now after you've cut? Um, and and actually in the process of him just becoming more aware and mindful, which is one of the things that Brene talks about is mindfulness, boundaries, and just leaning, I can't remember what she was saying, and leaning into
Mhm.
um the feelings of isolation and disconnection, having him bringing awareness and attention to the behavior has helped mitigate some of the risk. So
Well,
that's
and I
an
will say
example.
this too, like I think that that's really powerful what you just said, because that has actually been the thing that has brought the most, I guess, relief for the entire family, for us, because I do have a son who has some addictions, and um, we talk a lot about when are you doing it, why are you doing it, and where is it leading you to,
Hmm.
and then how do you feel? We do talk about like, so I guess I don't realize that we've been given the tools, like,
Yeah,
but in the beginning it was very hard because we're like, we were pointing it out. We were like, hey, this, do you see what you're doing? And so in the beginning, it was probably dysfunctional because we were like, what's going on? We were just trying
Yeah.
to figure out how do we get you off of this place where you're
Right.
like feeling like it's working, but we're like, it's
Yeah.
clearly not. But then also not being the end all be all telling him what to do,
Yeah.
because that actually created him to hide it. So then he was doing it
Yes.
in hiding. And that's really when you know you have an addiction, is if you're
Yeah.
hiding it, or
Yeah.
if you're stealing and harming other people to get to it.
Yeah.
That's a really big issue. And so the other thing too, and I think I want to mention that our doctor did tell us, particularly with this, is that um, hopefully a lot of this he'll grow out of, because as teenagers, like you said, they're impulsive. They can't
Mhm.
control some of those impulses. And
Yeah.
so as we age, like I think the show that I watched was like age 25 is when they're cognitively developed. Like that's when they're actually starting to
Yeah.
close some of those pathways.
Yeah.
That's
It's
why,
25 to 27, Cassie, is like kind of the range. Yeah.
which doesn't that blew my mind when I first heard that, because I was like, man, no wonder I was such an idiot as a youth. Like I
Totally.
didn't know any better. So not only did it give me some grace around my children, but it's actually given me grace for myself. Like, oh, I was not ready. So I
Yeah.
became a parent at 27. And I feel like even then I probably wasn't prepared to be a parent
Yeah.
because I was still growing up. And that makes perfect sense of why
Yeah.
we do the things we do. And really I think compassion is the biggest tool here, right? To
Yeah.
just have a lot of
Yeah.
compassion. And I can't, because of my experience with my own kids and with myself, I can't say enough how much compassion not only should you have for your child, but for yourself, because you're
Totally.
just trying to figure this out, and it's okay if you make
Yeah.
mistakes. But the number one tool that I use with my children and with myself is coming back around when I make a mistake, when I
Yeah.
fly off the handle, if I'm like shaming, I will come back and say, I am so sorry. I realize
Yes.
that I was out of line and I shouldn't have said the things that I said, but I was in my own shame. I was in my own
Yes.
anxiety. So like typically the reasons that we fly off the handle with our children where we can't control ourselves, we're in our own shame spiral. And we've got
Absolutely.
to get off the bus. Like somehow
Yeah.
we got to get ourselves off the bus. And if we can't get off the bus in the moment, once we get off the bus, you got to come back and say, hey,
Circle back
I
around.
was out of line. Please forgive me. I just want to say I'm so sorry that I,
Yeah.
I acted that way and it was
Yeah.
inappropriate.
Yeah.
Because you're giving them the tool to say the same thing. Like it's
Right.
okay to make mistakes and come back and say, wow, I'm really sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. That's that modeling. I think a big portion of what we do is model repair, model how we address our own maladaptive behaviors, model for us, model for our children, you know, how we manage anxiety, both effectively and ineffectively, and what we're trying to do to mitigate it. Because again, the reality is that all of us engage in numbing behaviors.
Yeah.
We may not have a full on addiction, but all of us engage in numbing behaviors. And I
And
really think that just that compassion and awareness and empathy is really, really critical.
And that's what I love so much about this book about Daring Greatly, is because Brene models it so well, even as the
Yeah,
author of someone who is like the expert in shame and
yeah,
just talking about it. She even shares her own stories of how she responded and how she made mistakes. And I
yeah,
love that. So do you notice this glow? Sorry, I'm like the
yeah,
sunrise is coming up. It's
yeah,
beautiful, but it's like everything is turning orange and pink in my
yeah.
office. I love it.
It's really
So,
cool.
I think probably one of the suggestions we could say is read this book as a way to
Yeah, it's a
understand
great book.
shame and maybe even have some tools, because she does give you tips and hints and things like that.
Yeah.
But I know we wanted to kind of end things
I
on
need,
time today.
yeah, I have to go.
Yeah. Do you want to read the parenting manifesto? Should we do that or should we save that for another time?
Why don't we, how long do you think that'll I just have to get my kid up and I like
Yeah,
have to get on Sarah's group.
probably maybe a
Could,
minute or two, because it's
okay,
basically like 1.5 pages.
okay.
So
I think let's go ahead and read it and we'll leave people with that. And then I think we could always if we haven't finished a conversation, we can always circle back the next time.
okay,
You
that
know what I
sounds great.
mean? So
Yeah. So the parenting manifesto actually bawled the first time I heard it because I was like, oh my gosh, this is so beautiful because it hit so many points of me. So I just want to say, like, if you feel something, lean into that and let it kind of just like guide your path. So the wholehearted parenting manifesto. Above all else, I want you to know that you are loved and lovable. You will learn this from my words and actions, the lessons on love. Oh, and I probably should preface this with this is basically her parenting manifesto, like to her child. She's saying this is how I'm committing to act towards my child. So you will learn this from my words and actions. The lessons on love are in how I treat you and how I treat myself. I want you to engage with the world from a place of worthiness. You will learn that you are worthy of love, belonging, and joy every time you see me practice self-compassion and embrace my own imperfections. We will practice courage in our family by showing up, letting ourselves be seen, and honoring vulnerability. We will share our stories of struggle and strength. There will always be room in our home for both. We will teach you compassion by practicing compassion with ourselves first, then with each other. We will set and respect boundaries. We will honor hard work, hope, and perseverance. Rest and play will be family values as well as family practices. You will learn accountability and respect by watching me make mistakes and make amends, and by watching how I ask for what I need and talk about how I feel. I want you to know joy, so together we will practice gratitude. I want you to feel joy, so together we will learn how to be vulnerable. When uncertainty and scarcity visit, you will be able to draw from the spirit that is part of our everyday life. Together we will cry and face fear and grief. I will want to take away your pain, but instead, I will sit with you and teach you how to feel it. That's so important.
Yeah,
We will
so
laugh and sing and dance and create. We will always have permission to be ourselves with each other. No matter what, you will always belong here. As you begin your wholehearted journey, the greatest gift that I can give you is to live and love with my whole heart and to dare greatly. I will not teach or love or show you anything perfectly, but I will let you see me, and I will always hold sacred the gift of seeing you, truly, deeply seeing you. So she does have a copy of this on her website, www.brenebrown.com. So if you want like a copy, she's got different versions of it. That's beautiful. I forgot that she had that there. So we just want to leave it there. Yeah. So parents can kind of
yeah,
take that, and it's
they can
great advice.
percolate on it. I'm gonna reread that and re-listen to this one. And I think
Yeah.
it would be good to kind of come back and think about what would we add anything to that? Like, is there
Yeah.
anything we would add or anything we would adjust
Yeah.
for our own family systems and cultures? And so yeah,
So
but let's just leave it there. This was
yeah.
this was a great conversation, Cassie.
Yeah,
Thank you.
for sure. Thank you. And you had so much knowledge on the topic. I love that you have this in your back pocket and you work with adolescents and kids every day. So page 244 in the book is where that manifesto is. I realize that we're not that quite that far, but we wanted to put that out here today for you to
Yes.
feel encouraged. And that's really what we want to leave you with always is a sense of encouragement and hope. And if you're not feeling hope, please reach out. Like we want to give you the gift of hope and know that you're not alone because as we navigate our day-to-day lives, we want to just connect with people who are like us and we all struggle. So it's just
Mhm.
know that we're all dealing with something and we can work together and get through these things together.
Yes. Yep. Absolutely. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. And we'll look forward to seeing you guys next week. We'll be back to Tuesdays. This week was a little wonky. We had some weather here in Oklahoma. So my kids were home some of the days, but we're back on it. So
All right.